So we are in Lamed Amud Aleph 30a. We are in the middle of unpacking Rav's statement. Rav gave us a list of 5 different sages, all of whom agree with the premise that chulin, ordinary, mundane, that's the word chulin means, mundane, like chol. Mundane food is not susceptible to impurity past degree number 2. So 1 is tameh and 2 is pasul. Beyond that, nothing. And what we've been doing is finding sources for each of these sages to derive or deduce from what they're saying that indeed chulin does not go past 2nd degree. So we're holding now is Rabbi Elazar, which is about a third from the bottom of the page. The word begins with the word shlishi, the chulin, and then reish aleph, Rabbi Elazar, Tanya, Rabbi Elazar, the Tanya, Rabbi Elazar Eimer, shlashtan shavin. See that?
Yeah.
Okay, the Tanya, so Rabbi Elazar is also of the opinion, Rabbi Elazar, is also of the opinion that chulin, ordinary, mundane food, is not susceptible to impurity past number 2. The Tanya, if we've learned in the Mishnah gauge text, Rabbi Elazar says as follows: Shlashtan shavin harishon. Shlashtan shavin. The following 3 are equal harishon in their 1st degree status: Sheba kodesh, v'sheba chulin, v'sheba truma. In terms of retaining 1st degree status, whether it is sacrificial food, whether it's ordinary mundane food, or it's truma, they each equally maintain a 1st degree status. I'll explain what that means in a moment and why that's necessary. But in terms of transference, there are differences. Namely, they, all 3 of them, whether we're talking about chulin, kodesh, or truma, whether it's sacrificial food, ordinary food, or truma, if they are 1st degree impurity, then they can impart shnayim, 2 levels of impurity, upaisal echad, and then a 4th degree, the kodesh, if we're talking about sacrificial food. Yeah, following?
2 levels, they can impart 2 levels of impurity.
Which is degree 2 and 3, and then to a 4th degree if it's kodesh, if it's sacrificial.
Or if it's kodesh.
They can do 2 and 1 if it's kodesh. 2 tameh, 1 pasul. 2 tameh means twice, right? Because again, tameh means
3, and then if it's
but 2 and 3 are both tameh, and then the 4th is pasul, right? The word tameh means it receives and can give. The word pasul means it only receives, doesn't give.
Because 3 can give to 4.
That's right. So metameh shnayim, 2 become tameh, upaisal echad, but the last one becomes pasul, so that's 4th degree. Bekodesh if it's sacrificial. Metameh echad, it can make 1 tameh, upaisal echad, and then invalidate another 2nd and 3rd degree. Betruma if it's truma, upaisal echad b'chulin, and it only invalidates 1 degree away from it if it's chulin, if it is ordinary food. So we see here clearly, Rabbi Elazar says that chulin doesn't go past 2nd degree. He said so clearly, right?
Yeah.
That's clear.
Yeah.
But what's he trying to tell us? It seems to be obvious, but what's Rabbi Elazar teaching us?
Yeah.
So Rabbi Elazar is teaching us is like,
right?
Yeah, it's just
and
right.
It's a different wording.
So Rashi explains that there's another way to think about this, and Rabbi Elazar is telling us not to think that way, which is like this: when we say that kodesh can go to 4th degree and truma to 3rd degree, does that mean, well, when that happens, what is the status of the 1st degree? In order for this impurity to reach kodesh at a 4th degree, what kind of food item is the 1st degree, which is imparting the 2nd and 3rd and then the 4th? Is that chulin or is it kodesh? So there are those that maintain that the only way for kodesh to be a recipient for kachim, for sacrificial food to be a recipient at the 4th degree, is only if degree number 1 was also kachim, was also sacrificial food.
You mean kachim can only be
A recipient at the 4th degree. At the 4th degree.
At the 4th degree.
It can only reach that far if the source was also kachim.
At 1st degree impurity.
That's right. And that's what Rabbi Lezer is saying. Shloshtem shavin, at the 1st degree, whether it's Truma, Kodesh, or Chulin, they're all equal in terms of their transference to whatever. To Kodesh 3, to Truma 2, to Chulin 1. So no matter what the 1st degree is, whether the 1st degree is a Truma item that's impure, whether the 1st degree is a sacrificial food that's impure, or whether the 1st degree is ordinary food that's impure, it can transfer equally. 3 to Kodesh, 2 to Truma, and 1 to Chulin. So that's the chidush, that's the uniqueness of Rabbi Lezer's law here in telling you that the 1st degree impurity is equal no matter what kind of food item it is in terms of what it can transfer to. Now, what does it transfer to? Kodesh 4, Truma 3, and Kachin to level 2. So here we at least, Chulin to level 2, which at least for the point of our conversation, Rabbi can use this as a source to establish Rabbi Lezer's of the view that Chulin doesn't go past 2. But what Rabbi Lezer is saying is not just that. Rabbi Lezer is telling us a deeper law, telling us about the source degree and whether the source degree, if it's an ordinary food, can also have the potency to give kachim 3rd degree. And the answer is yes, according to Rabbi Lezer. 4th degree in kachim and 3rd degree in truma, according to Rabbi Lezer, the answer is yes. Others disagree with Rabbi Lezer and say no. If you want to get the 4th degree kachim, the original also has to be kachim. Others. In other words, if we look up the source of this text, we'll find others who disagree. Right? That's what Rashi tells us.
That's his uniqueness.
That's the uniqueness of what he's saying. That's right.
They're all equal.
That's right. Yep, that's how Rashi explained it for us. But at least, as far as we're concerned, Rav is using this as a source text that Rabbi Lezer agrees with the premise that ordinary food does not go past 2nd degree. Okay, so the last in the list of the 5 sages is Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer. So this is Rabbi Elazar without a yud, and now it's Eliezer with a yud. Elazar, Eliezer. Yeah, you see it?
Yeah, now we're on Rabbi Eliezer.
That's right.
Yeah.
Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer said Rav is also of the view that Chulin does not go past 2nd degree. So from where do we know this? The Tanan, for we've learned in the tractate Challah. So let's establish a few premises before we begin learning this. What Rashi does for us. Rashi gives us a few established premises before we start, which is like this. Let's actually read the whole Rashi. Let's read the Rashi. Yeah? Oh, yeah. You want to look at the Rashi? I want to look at the Rashi.
No, I was trying to find my place. No, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so I'm going to read the Rashi. If you want to follow along the text, you can go to the Rashi. We're going to read it. Just because it's important to understand this Rashi. It's not going to be on that page. You'll have to go to the original page. You can see the Rashi. Okay. Here, give me I'll find it.
Go ahead, it's okay. I'll listen.
Yeah? Okay, Rashi writes like this. Reisha de Masnisan, the beginning of this Mishnah that we're about to quote, the Masechta Challah, in tractate Challah, right? Challah is the law of dough, that there's a portion of that dough must be given to the kohen. Maybe you have to get it. I don't know. Someone's there. Was it taken already? No. Apologies. Yeah, I think it's here. Okay. So again, Reisha de Masnisan, the beginning of the Mishnah, is in Sechta Chal and check the Challah. Challah is this portion of dough that has to be given to the kohen. So Hachi. This is the beginning of that Mishnaic text. It reads like this. Shir Challah, the measure for how much dough you have to take as Challah. Yeah. Challah is, we refer to Challah as a whole loaf. But Challah is really the portion you take to give to the kohen. You have a glob of dough, you take a portion, and you give it to the kohen. Okay. So what's the amount you have to give? Echad michadalit. 1 out of 24. So 1 portion of 24. 1/24. Yeah. Now, nitma isasa. What happens if the dough now became impure? If it was shegeges, if it accidentally became impure, oy anusa, or someone, imposed forcibly impurity onto it. So then it becomes less valuable or something, and therefore echad mimemches. You only give 1 of 48, not 1 of 24. Okay. Now, nitn lisbim mezid, if you intentionally went and made it impure, so echad mechavdalid, you still maintain the original law of giving 1 of 24. Why is that? We don't want the sinner to be gaining. So the guy sinned by intentionally making his dough impure, and now he gives less challah. Not fair. So if it happened to him accidentally and it became impure, 1 of 48. If he intentionally made it impure, he sticks to the original law and it's 1 of 24. Okay. Now comes Rabbi Lezer's statement. Rabbi Lezer says, hey, chada nitmis, we're still reading from Rashi. Hey, chada nitmis, mezida.
Oh, sorry, can I just?
Yeah.
So that part that's he took as impure, it doesn't get burned?
It gets burned. Ordinarily it goes to the kohen. In this case, we get burned because it's impure.
You burn.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, that's the law. Anyway. So, now, says Rabbi Lezer, hey, chada mezida, if a person intentionally made his dough impure. So says Rabbi Lezer like this. Talosh acheres betala. Acheres betala. Make another a dough in purity. In purity, maintaining its purity. Another dough. The tito min haTorah alatmeya. And you can take challah from the pure loaf, from the pure dough. First of all, you're going to take challah for itself, because it itself is required to have challah removed. And you will also take challah from this dough on behalf of the impure one. And that way the challah you're giving to the kohen maintains its purity. Instead of taking from the dough that is impure, making it an impure dough.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Take it. This is Rabbi Lezer giving you the solution. Make another a pure dough,
Like 2 hours.
and take challah for both. Now,
And that's if it's intentional, 1/24, and it's accidental 1/48. Is that how you come with the?
Yeah. I think if I'm not mistaken, it's not 1 of 24, but I think it's once you hit 24, then you take a portion, or once you hit 48, then you take a portion. I'm not mistaken. I don't think every 20.
Would one of those be one?
Or maybe it is. Maybe it's one every 24 has to take a portion. I don't know.
But anyway, it would be both.
Whatever the scenario is.
The pure dough, the first one is 1/24, and the one it's making up for is 1/48.
Yeah, but over here he said you're talking about where you intentionally made it impure, which means you maintain it to 1/24 because you intentionally made it impure. That's how Rashi describes it here.
Thinking about the accidental one.
Rashi here describes it.
So it's 1.
Yeah, I suppose.
1/48 for the first.
And 1/24 for the other one. Yeah.
Okay.
I assume that that's the case, but Rashi over here describes Rabbi Lezer as talking about where you made it intentionally impure. Okay, now here, so that's premise number 1, which is this measure of 1/24, 1/48. That's premise number 1. And premise number 2 is that you remove challah from one set of dough onto the other set of dough. But here comes another interesting and important element. Mishum de mitzvah litroif min hamukaf. The halacha is that you have to remove challah. Literally, mukaf means that which surrounds. Meaning to say, you have to take challah from the entirety of the dough of which you are exempting from challah. Meaning to say, if I have dough in my house, and then I'm in my shop, so I can't take challah from this dough in my shop, that it should cover the challah in my house. I have to take the dough, I have to take the challah from the rest of the dough, from within the premise and within the unit from which I'm exempting from this. from which I'm exempting with this challah. Following?
So, it has to be.
It has to be from this. I can't take dough.
The challah that is before.
Challah has to be taken from the actual location, the actual premise of the rest of the dough that I'm exempting by the removing of this challah. So I can't take challah in my office on behalf of the challah on behalf of the dough that's in my house.
Yeah.
They have to be together.
So how do you do that with a tamei dough?
So how do I do that with tamei dough and with a Torah dough without ruining it?
Yeah.
This is the question. So Keita Tasa, what should you do? Sheyeh min hamukaf, that it should be from the same premise. The Torah, and I tell us and that the pure will be taken on behalf of the impure, mi'isa Torah, from the pure dough. How do I do that? So that's premise number one. That it has to be from the same location. Premise number two.
For the same body.
I said from the same body of dough, yeah.
Same body.
So how do I do that without ruining my pure dough? Number one. Number two, you can only take challah from that which has not been taken challah yet. Right? So if I have a glove of dough, I've taken challah. It's pure. Now I have another pure dough. And then I mix the two doughs together. And then I take again from the pure dough that I've already taken challah from. Can't do that. You have to take it from a place that you haven't taken yet. Okay. So ad shaloi homer chalasa. So long as I haven't removed my challah yet, because the homer chalasa, the Torah, if the pure one already has its challah removed, so then matzila for shimon ptur ala chiyuv. You can no longer take challah from something which is exempt from challah to exonerate you from something else which is obligated on challah. But challah would not extend. Sushem challah. Sorry, yeah. Well, I can take the fractions, whatever measure I would take from here, I take from here. But because this has already been exempt, I can't now take challah again on behalf of something else. So there's two conditions that have to happen now. If Rabbi told us that you're taking challah from the pure on behalf of the impure, so two conditions have to be met. Number one, that dough has to have never been challah taken from it. That pure dough. Number one. Number two, somehow I have to make this challah that's pure be attached to the impure challah without ruining its purity. Without transferring the impurity to the dough I'm taking. How do I do that? So says now go back to the Gemara. Now let's go back to the Gemara. Now Rabbi Lezer says, Challah, they tell us, Challah can be removed from the pure dough ala tmeya on behalf of the impure dough. Kate said, how will you do this? Shtei isois, you have two loaves of dough, you have two doughs, patches of dough. Achas tahira, one is pure. Achas tmeya, the other one is impure. So, noitel kedei challah mi isa shaloi horma chalasa. You take the challah from dough that has not been, from which the challah has not been taken yet. That's the condition number one. Now, the noisin, and you place pachas mikabetza, less than the amount of an olive, the emtza in the middle.
Kabetza?
Less than the amount of an egg, I'm sorry. Yeah. So you have pure dough, impure dough, and in between, you put less than a kabetza.
Of which dough? Of probably the pure dough?
The pure.
The pure?
Yes. So now it itself receives impurity, but doesn't transfer. Why? Because cholon doesn't go past degree number 2.
Doesn't have anything to do with it being less than a...
So let's see. Well, that's a good point. Let's see. The reason we have to put that in the middle is so you can satisfy the other condition, which is when you remove challah, it has to be from the same unit. And putting that piece in the middle connects them for this thing.
In some degrees.
That's right.
But not in others.
That's right.
Amen.
That's right. The Chachamim, now the sages, top of page Lamed Amud Beis 30b. The Chachamim Oisin. The sages say, no, you cannot do that. We'll find out why. The Tanya, and we've learned in the Mishnah. So this quote, the text we just learned, is a Mishnah. Now, Tanya, we have a Braita, another Mishnaic age text, which says kabetza, that the thing in the middle could even be kabetza.
So less than.
Not just less than, even if it is a kabetza, even if it's a full size of an egg, which means it's not because, like as you suggested, because it's less than that's why the transfer doesn't go. It's a full kabetza. So you have impure dough, kabetza of dough, and then pure dough. And you're taking challah from the pure dough. And the kabetza of dough connect the two. Even though the first one is impure, the pure one does not become impure by virtue of the one in the middle. So, and we explain. Savarua, how do we conclude from this dispute that for ordinary chulun doesn't go past second degree is because whether you're talking about the Mishnah, which says that the middle is less than the kabetza, or whether you're talking about the Braita, which says that the middle is even more than the kabetza, the Isar Rishayna, the first batch of dough is a first degree impurity. That's number one. And again, because it's first degree impurity, it gives to the middle one second degree, and second degree doesn't give to third. Right?
Because it's chulin.
Because it's chulin. That's the point. That's the proof. But here's another element we need to consider, which is chulin hatful l'chala like a chaladami. Chulin, ordinary food, from which challah has not been removed, does not get the status of challah. Why is that important? Because challah is treated like truma. So once I remove that challah, this is like truma, which means this is susceptible to third degree. Now, what happens to dough from which I haven't removed challah yet? Does it get challah status? Because challah somewhere makes it. It's chulin, yes, but because challah hasn't been removed, perhaps the whole thing gets the status of challah because there's challah somewhere in there. In which case, it would be susceptible to third degree. So therefore, in order for Rabbi Lezer to maintain that you may take challah from the pure, we have to maintain two things. Number one, that there's no third degree transference in chulin, because this is number one, tuma, the kabetza in the middle is number two, and it doesn't go to number three, the middle one. And premise number two is we have to establish that this actually is considered chulin. Because if you're of the view that this is considered challah, considering that it hasn't been removed yet, then it gets truma status, and now it's third degree impurity. And truma could be, and so could challah be third degree impurity. So this is what we have to maintain. That A, ordinary chulin from which challah hasn't been removed retains its status as chulin, and therefore no third degree transference. And that's what the Gemara says. So my love, so therefore is it not then, this then would be the basis of the dispute between the sages and Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer said, which says you're allowed to take from the pure. You have to take challah from the pure on behalf of the impure, thanks to the dough in the middle. Whereas the sages say you cannot. What's the root of their argument? Mar Savar, Rabbi Lezer is of the view, Ein Sheni Oisa Shlishi b'chulin. Second degree does not make third degree in chulin, and therefore I can take from this dough because there's a middle, first degree, middle, second degree.
He considers that dough chulin.
That's right, and therefore it's not third degree. And Mar Savar and the sages, when they said that you cannot do this whole combino, you can't do this little trick. Why did they say you can't do that? Perhaps because they are of the view, perhaps it's because they are of the view that second degree does make third degree.
It doesn't really matter what they're arguing. It just goes to prove again that the
yes. Okay, that's right. So as far as Rav's statement, Rav said that Rabbi Lezer is on the list of people who are of the view that second degree doesn't make third degree in chulin, and we established that. But now the Gemara is asking, what do the sages believe? Do the sages believe also? So at this point, we're assuming that the sages are of the view that second degree does make third degree impurity, which is why you can't do this little trick.
Because there's challah in there somewhere.
Not because it's challah, because chulin. The Gemara's next suggestion is going to be because it's challah.
Okay.
At the moment, the Gemara is saying maybe the reason is because chulin is susceptible to third degree. And so the Gemara, like you're saying, Omar Rav Mari, following?
Yeah.
Omar Rav Mari, Rav Kana, Rav Mari, son of Kana, Rav Kana said, the Kul Amu, no. Everybody agrees, even the sages agree that ordinarily second degree is not susceptible to third degree impurity for ordinary food. But over here, the reason why the third degree does get impurity is because of chulin hatfulin l'chalakam mifagi. Because the question here is, how do you treat chulin from which challah hasn't been removed yet? Mar Savar, the sages are of the view, that because the challah hasn't been removed, we treat the entirety as if it's challah. And therefore that's why it's susceptible to third degree, because it's treated like challah, which is basically truma. But if it were regular chulin, it would not receive third degree. Umar Savar, and Abelazar says, like a chaldami. It's not considered like challah, and therefore you could, and if it doesn't transfer because it's ordinary chulin, and therefore you could. But the premise that ordinary challah doesn't transfer past ordinary dough does not transfer past the ordinary food past third doesn't transfer past second degree. Everybody agrees to that premise. That's preserved for Rabbi Lezer and the sages. That's right.
That's just another example.
That's right. The Gemara now concludes, and we'll conclude this discussion with this. Perhaps you can suggest even forward to kul alma chulun atfun l'chal like a chaldam. The sages also agree that chulun from which challah hasn't been removed is not considered challah; it's considered ordinary chulun. The ein sheni oisash tishi b'chulun, and chulun does not go past second degree. So if so, why don't the sages allow you to do this trick?
Yeah, why not?
So this explains the Gemara Bahacha, perhaps over here, the mutter ligrim tumul chulun shebet Yisrael kamifuki. Here they're arguing, are you allowed to turn ordinary food in Israel into impurity? It's a prohibition to take, for example, sacrificial food and make it impure. It's a prohibition to do so to Teruma. Yeah. Here in the exile, outside of Israel, one can take food and make it impure anytime, and we do it all day. We make food impure all the time by doing everything. The question is in Israel, are you allowed to intentionally turn ordinary food into truma, into impurity in Israel? Or because of Israel, we try our best, or we're required to make sure nothing becomes impure. If it does, it does, but we have to try to avoid it. Yeah. So Marisavar, Rabbi Lezer of the few mutter ligrim tumma l'chulun shebet Yisrael. You may cause impurity. You may cause ordinary food to become impure even in Israel, and therefore you can't take that middle piece, put it in the middle, and make it impure, because you're allowed to turn something impure intentionally. But Marisavar, the sages of the view, aser ligrim tumma l'chulun shebet Yisrael. One may not cause ordinary food in Israel to become impure, and therefore that's the problem here. Because taking the middle and making it touch this is making it impure, and all to do that according to the sages.
Oh, that's
so the issue is
what was being
that's right.
Impure. The
piece in the middle. The issue is not on the question of whether you can remove challah. If you did this, everybody agrees you can do it. Everybody agrees you can take challah from that pure thing because it's attached, and because impurity doesn't transfer, because there's no such thing as second degree impurity, and because we treat this as ordinary chulun. Everybody agrees with that. The problem is, can you even set this up? Once it's set up, everybody agrees you can remove challah from the impure on behalf of the pure. You can remove challah from the pure on behalf of the impure because it's attached and because the tumah doesn't transfer.
Well, there was an argument about whether
this is the new version, the new understanding. Under the new premise, that's correct. Under the new premise, everybody agrees that the transference doesn't happen.
Okay.
The question is, are you even allowed to set it up? According to Rabbi Lezer, you may set it up because you're allowed to turn chulun into impurity in Israel. And the sages of the view, you're not allowed to make impure, you're not allowed to make chulun into, intentionally turn chulun into impurity. That's the essence of the argument at this point. And the halacha is, you may make food in Israel impure intentionally. And I imagine the reason is because it's an impossible decree. It means anybody who went to a funeral wouldn't be able to touch food for the next week or longer. It would be impossible to maintain such a decree, that you have to avoid all impurity for all food.
Well, this dough that was impure, what happens to that dough once challah has been taken from it via this vehicle?
So that
big piece, what happens to it?
It's impure food that you're allowed to eat.
You're allowed to eat.
You're not a kohen.
Yeah.
You're giving the pure stuff to the kohen, and you're going to eat their impure bread, like most of our bread's impure.
Yeah.
No problem. Okay. The issue is only what you give to the kohen. Right? All right. Tomorrow, Monday, God willing.
What about the option of just burning that piece of challah from the impure?
Well, because in doing the mitzvah challah, because challah is meant to be given to the kohen.
Right.
And meant to be eaten by the kohen. Okay, so Rabbi is giving us a solution how we can give to the kohen impurity. By maintaining its purity.
It's a problem with this issue of intentionally making something.
But what's the problem with that? According to Rabbi, there's no problem. There is no problem with it.
What?
According to Rabbi, there is no problem with making it intentionally impure.
Well, no, but it's a dispute. Right?
Okay, so Rabbi says it's no problem. And Allah is it's indeed no problem to make it impure. We make food impure all the time. You ever go to a restaurant in Israel, you turned all your food into impurity, even though the food's probably impure before you even touched it.
Just burn it.
But then you don't fulfill the mitzvah properly. There's a mitzvah of Challah here. There's a biblical commandment to give this portion to the kohen. You're not fulfilling that if you don't do it properly. That outweighs making this little bit of thing impurity, especially considering according to Lezer, it's completely permissible to do so.
Okay.
Right? Okay, wonderful Shabbos. And on Monday, we get to the discussion, a very beautiful discussion, and we'll get to see the Rebbe's commentary on this discussion about how the Jews sang the song when they came out of the sea. So coming towards Pesach, it's a beautiful insight going forward into that. Okay, wonderful day and a good Ner Shabbos.